Little Nightmares 2 ending raised more questions than answering any about what is happening in this cryptic world. I already went over some theories that might explain what is the culprit of this world looking the way it does. But today, I will expand massively on those theories. Hi folks, I'm R, your narrator, and here are some theories about what happened in Little Nightmares 2. Before we get into the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and beware, as there will be spoilers ahead. Going through the Little Nightmares world events, it all started with Very Little Nightmares, where we control an unnamed girl. This unnamed girl faces some deformed antagonists in the nest, and she ends up falling into her presumable death into the sea. 6, one of our main protagonists, picks up from there and presumably wears the yellow raincoat this girl was wearing and uses a wooden raft to sail across the water to the Pale City. I know in one of my videos I mentioned she travels to the Maw, but after going through the comics, it suggests that she goes to the Pale City first. But again, that's still debatable. In the Pale City she comes across the Ferryman, an overshadowing character with a deformed face. He transports 6 to the Maw, with her having her memories clouded. She wakes up in the Maw with partial memory, seated with some other hood-wearing kids who tell their stories, how they ended up in the Maw. There are certain supernatural entities such as the mirrors, the TVs, and also the North Wind, which deformed the children and possessed them. But unfortunately, as the comics seemingly got cancelled, it might be due to the creators wanting to take a different route with Little Nightmares' story. So 6 going to the Pale City before going to the Maw is not canon. There are also some discrepancies, as the Pale City in the comic was swarmed by the guests, but in the Little Nightmares 2 game, we only had the viewers and some other antagonists, with no sight of the guests. In Little Nightmares, 6 manages to consume the lady and absorb her powers, and presumably escapes to the Pale City again. The story in Little Nightmares 2 seems very scrambled, as 6 is now imprisoned by the Hunter. She doesn't have her obtained powers from the lady, also she doesn't have her raincoat, with the ending of Little Nightmares 2 showing that she teleports through the TV, looking at her shadow figure which appears in the Maw when she gives in to her hunger, and then looks at a picture of the Maw while experiencing another bout of hunger, presumably traveling to the Maw right after. Is Little Nightmares 1 a prequel to Little Nightmares 2? Is that in order from Very Little Nightmares, then Little Nightmares 2, and then the Maw? What about the comic? The timeline is very confusing and doesn't seem to follow a linear line, as if it goes in circles. Let's go over some detailed theories and try to connect the dots. Following what I discussed already in the previous video, which you can watch by hitting the card above to get a better idea of this theory, the Eye is the controller where he orchestrates every step of the way, and everything that happened according to plan in a perfect time loop. Mono waking up in the wilderness with a TV behind him, which presumably had teleported him here, not far from the Hunter's house where 6 is imprisoned. Mono having the need and being attracted to go further into the city, then hiding and escaping. Then Mono stumbling upon the Hunter's house with an imprisoned 6 fully intact and not harmed, who has seemingly been waiting for a long time, who then plays a major role in the ending for Mono to become another important piece of the puzzle. The placement of the raincoat in a room for Mono and 6 to stumble upon. The dream teasing Mono about the door where the Thin Man is imprisoned. The specific placement of TVs with statics on for Mono to interact with and eventually free the Thin Man. Then subsequently a possessed shadow figure, Thin Man, which is reminiscent of what Mono used to be like. The Thin Man snatching 6, distorting her realities and producing a shadow figure from her too. Even in the radio tower realm, where Mono is directed in a specific route, when trying to enter a room, the door closing and another one opening. And finally when Mono is in the depth, the trails of lights and the darkness leading him to the chair with a spotlight turning on to indicate Mono to sit on. All have been according to plan, and have happened presumably many times before. Otherwise, why would there be a chair in the depth? Why wouldn't the perpetrators kill 6 when they capture her? And finally, why would 6 drop Mono exactly where he needs to be? Facing off all the antagonists and 6 getting kidnapped all happen in a cycle with the Eye as the mastermind behind it. 6 gets kidnapped many times but never gets harmed. At a point, the doctor dismisses a 6 cowering in a corner, and all the perpetrators keep pushing Mono and 6 further into the city closer to the radio tower. Six seems like a trustworthy companion throughout the game, apart from the very ending. Many of you have mentioned in the comments that Little Nightmares 2 is a prequel, which would naturally make sense, as Six doesn't have her powers, neither the raincoat, and at the end, she seems to decide to go to the maw. Six also gets her shadow figure after being snatched by the Thin Man, which we see throughout Little Nightmares 1. She also develops her bouts of hunger at the end of Little Nightmares 2, which gives us strong evidence that the events of the Pale City happened prior to the events in the maw. But adding the events of Very Little Nightmares and the comics to the equation makes it more confusing. In Very Little Nightmares, Six climbs down the cliff, presumably getting on the wooden raft, and leaves. We also get a glimpse of a yellow raincoat floating atop the water, which implies that Six wears it. If Six wears the raincoat, then how doesn't she have it in the beginning of Little Nightmares 2? If Six doesn't wear the raincoat, then that would make more sense in a way. But again, why would they show it at the end of Very Little Nightmares? And how does the raincoat end up in a parcel room? If we decide to dismiss all hints given, we can assume that this is a different raincoat to the one that the unnamed girl was wearing in Very Little Nightmares, which is not very likely. Also, the hunter seems very vicious and shoots anyone at sight. Why would he keep Six in a room fully unharmed? Was she placed there on purpose? Was she under the spell of the eye as she is using a tangible object, which is the music box? The comic suggests that Six was brought to the maw from the Pale City by the ferryman, possibly after the events of Very Little Nightmares. She wears a yellow raincoat and seems amnesiac, not remembering much. How she ended up in the boat of ferryman and what happened after encountering the ferryman in the Pale City. This might suggest why Six randomly wakes up in the maw not remembering much, with a dream of the lady, which leads her to the lady in order to kill her. There's strong evidence that Little Nightmares 2's events happened before Little Nightmares 1, but as time and space is all distorted, the events might happen in a circle. Therefore, no beginning or ending. I have a strong theory about what the dreams might entail. Buckle up folks, as it's gonna be a wild ride through the theory lane. Six dreams of the lady in the beginning of Little Nightmares 1, ends up killing her and absorbing her powers. Mono dreams of the door with the eye symbol on it and ends up killing the Thin Man. The runaway kid in the Secrets of the Maw DLC dreams of the granny and ends up killing her. Do you see a trend here? What I'm about to theorize now works apart the runaway kid. Mono kills the Thin Man and eventually becomes him. This might suggest that Six kills the lady and eventually becomes her as well. And as we know, she already possesses her powers. This is just an add-on theory about the dreams which have been orchestrated by the eye to keep the cycle running. Six has the chance to kill Mono many times, especially in the incinerator. Why didn't she until the last point? There are two theories, that she has been evil and part of the plan since the very beginning, and the second theory that she becomes evil after getting kidnapped by the Thin Man. The first one suggests that Six is placed in the hunter's house, according to the plan, for an oblivious Mono to save her. Throughout the game, Six doesn't kill Mono because she's mind-controlled by the eye to get him where he needs to be, the bridge. At the bridge, Six drops Mono to the depth where he gets stuck and grows to an adult before a younger version of himself frees him. The second theory is that Six becomes mind-controlled after getting kidnapped by the Thin Man, as we also witness a shadow figure appearing. Many of you also suggested that Six drops Mono because she doesn't want to eat him, but unfortunately, that doesn't add up. Six drops Mono presumably without knowing what's under. The drop could easily kill him. Also, the fate Mono faces in the depth is far worse than being eaten and done with quickly, even if Six knew of the outcome. Six could also tell Mono to run away, and Mono could easily defeat Six as he possesses powerful abilities. So unfortunately, I don't believe Six drops Mono to save him from being eaten. Next question is why an older Mono, dubbed as the Thin Man, chases after himself, kidnaps Six and doesn't attempt to talk to himself to avoid getting imprisoned. As we see through the game, when Mono faces the TV statics, black ashes rise above him, seemingly trying to evaporate him or turn him into a shadow. The Thin Man already is a shadow and has ashes rising above him. This could hint out that the Thin Man or the older Mono has been placed under the eye spell, or that his older self has transformed or disappeared into a shadow figure who is used by the eye. Now this part can't be explained easily. The streets of the Pale City are swarmed by the guests in the comic. But in the game, the streets are empty with the thin viewers in sight. As the comics got cancelled and didn't release any other issues after the second one, it might mean that the creators just decided to take a different creative turn in the story they initially wanted to develop. And that about does it for this video, folks. I think I can end the Little Nightmares series here, maybe after making a video about the comic stories as well, until more information comes out. What do you think? Should I make more videos about Little Nightmares theories? Let me know in the comment section down below. For more videos, stay tuned by hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell. I've been your host, R. Thanks for watching the video. Until the next one, have a fantastic day.